When you're young, you don't see things for what they really are. The world seems a lot simpler. The relationships that shape your life seem more defined. As children, we learn to trust those closest to us, our parents, our family. They are supposed to be the pillars that support us, the ones who guide us through life's challenges. But the truth is that not all parents are capable of that role. Sometimes the people who are meant to nurture you end up leaving scars that you carry for the rest of your life. That was the reality I was slowly waking up to, but it wasn't an easy lesson to learn. When my parents divorced, I was just 5 years old. It wasn't just a separation of their lives, it was the beginning of an emotional rift that would echo throughout the rest of mine. My brother, 2 years older than me, seemed to understand the dynamics of their relationship far earlier than I did. He had seen the cracks in our father's behavior, the selfishness, the inconsistency, the way he would abandon people when they needed him most. But I couldn't. I wasn't ready to see the truth. I wanted to believe that my father was still someone I could count on, despite everything. I was blind to the reality that he wasn't capable of being the parent I thought I needed him to be. For years, I clung to that hope. I stayed close to my father even as my brother started pulling away. By the time my brother was a teenager, he had stopped visiting Dad altogether. He would see him maybe 5 times over the course of his adult life, and each time, it was more out of obligation than love. My brother could see through my father's facade. He could recognize the manipulation, the lies, the self-centeredness that defined who Dad really was. He made the difficult decision to cut ties, and in doing so, he set a boundary that I didn't know how to set for myself. Even as my brother distanced himself, I kept trying. I kept making excuses for Dad's behavior, believing that he could change, that he would become the person I needed him to be if I just loved him enough. Maybe he just needed a little more patience, a little more understanding. I had this irrational hope that someday he would wake up and realize the damage he had caused, and that he would come to me, apologetic, ready to make things right. But it didn't happen that way. When I was 11 years old, I remember one of the moments that shaped my understanding of my father's nature. He had just gone through a breakup. His girlfriend had left him, and to nobody's surprise, it was because he had cheated on her, just like he had cheated on every other girlfriend he'd ever had. Dad was upset, and I could see it in his eyes. He needed comfort. I didn't know how to help, but I wanted to. I was just a child, and I thought that giving him something small, something that could help him feel less alone, might ease his pain. So I gave him my cat. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. I wanted to show him that I cared, that I was there for him in the way he needed. In my mind, it was an act of love, even though I didn't fully understand the gravity of what was happening in our family dynamic. But looking back, I see it differently. I was the child trying to comfort the adult who should have been comforting me. In that moment, I wasn't just offering him companionship, I was trying to fill a void that I couldn't understand. It was a role reversal that would come to define our relationship for years to come. I was always the one reaching out, the one trying to heal, the one who wanted so desperately for him to be the person I imagined him to be. As I grew older, I realized that I wasn't the only one struggling with the pain of our fractured family. My brother, who had distanced himself long before I did, had found his own ways of coping with the absence of a reliable father figure. He had his own battles, his own demons. He turned to alcohol, and his life was filled with a sadness that nobody seemed to know how to fix. But unlike me, he had already made peace with the fact that our father wasn't someone who could help him. He didn't have the same illusions I did. I wish I had learned from him sooner. The day my brother died was the day everything shifted. My brother was only 30 years old when he took his life. His struggles with addiction had been well known, but his death still came as a shock. He had been a part of my life, even if he had distanced himself from Dad, and now he was gone. The grief was raw, and it hit me in ways I wasn't prepared for. He was my brother, my only sibling, and his death left a void that couldn't be filled. In the wake of his death, there was more than just emotional grief to contend with. There was the mess of his estate, the legal complexities that came with it. My brother had little in terms of material wealth. His home was his only asset. And yet, his death had created a web of legal and financial complications that no one had anticipated. I had thought it would be a simple process. My father, despite everything, had promised me that he wouldn't be involved in fighting over the estate. He had promised that he wouldn't come after the half of it that he was entitled to. He had given me his word. But once again, my father betrayed me. 2 weeks later, my mom called me. She was in tears, trying to figure out why my father was refusing to sign the necessary paperwork so that she could settle my brother's estate. Not only was he refusing to sign, but he had become combative. He was demanding his share of the estate, something he had promised he wouldn't do. I was stunned. I couldn't understand why he was doing this, why he would go back on his word. This wasn't just a financial issue, it was a sign of how little he cared about the people around him. It was another revelation of his true nature. When I called him to confront him about it, the anger was immediate. He didn't even let me speak before he started shouting at me. His words cut through me like knives. He called me a money-hungry bitch just like my mother, accusing me of wanting more than I deserved. His voice was full of venom, and it was completely unprovoked. All I wanted was to understand what had happened, to try to make sense of why he had gone back on his word. But it wasn't a conversation. It was an attack. I had never felt more alone than I did in that moment. The man I had spent my entire life defending, the man I had always hoped would come around, had just shown me that he wasn't worth defending. He had become a stranger to me, someone I didn't recognize. The man who was supposed to be a father, to me, had turned into a person I no longer wanted in my life. It took me months to process what had happened. The anger, the confusion, the deep sense of betrayal, it all mixed together, leaving me exhausted. In the end, I made the decision to send him a message. I wasn't expecting a response. I wasn't even sure I wanted one, but I needed to say something. I told him that I had forgiven him for everything he had done, that I hoped he would find peace. It was a final attempt at closure, at letting go. And yet, even in that moment, I knew it wouldn't change anything. I knew he wouldn't respond. And he didn't. I had to tell my children, my 2 young boys, that they wouldn't be seeing their grandfather anymore. They didn't understand. How could they? For them, it was just another confusing shift in their world. I hated that I had to be the one to explain it, that they had to lose a family member they didn't fully know. I hated that the past 2 Christmases had been marred by this absence, by the absence of my brother, who had been such an integral part of my life, and by the absence of my father, who was now nothing more than a ghost in the background of my memories. It's been a year since I sent that message, and the grief still lingers. It's not just the loss of my brother or the pain of my father's betrayal. It's the loss of something deeper, the loss of hope, the loss of a dream that one day things would get better. But the truth is, some things don't get better. Some wounds don't heal, and some people never change. This is my story. It's not an easy one to tell, but it's mine. And it's still unfolding. The journey of letting go, of accepting the people for who they truly are, is something I am still navigating every day. But the one thing I know for sure is that I deserve more than the empty promises, the lies, and the broken relationships. I've endured. I deserve peace, and even though it's still painful, I am learning to move forward. I am learning that sometimes, the only way to protect your heart is to let go of the people who hurt you, even if they're family.